909 in Studio is brought to you by 90.9 The Bridge in Kansas City. To find out how you can become a sustaining member or to donate, go to bridge909.org. You know, our guest today on The Bridge has such a long history of success, but I think that the thing that we love the most is the fact that he's still chasing the muse after all of the success that he's had. The new album from John Oates is called Arkansas. It's his sixth solo album. It's on 30 Tigers. He is a member of both the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He's playing in Kansas City at the Folk Alliance. He'll be coming back with Hall and Oates on Friday, June 20th at the Sprint Center. He also has a very recent memoir in hardcover, Change of Seasons, which is also coming out on paperback on May 29th. John, thanks so much for coming in and taking the time to talk with us today.
How do I find time to do all this? I
don't. That was my first question.
Every time I hear that, I say, what is wrong with me?
Well, and the crazy thing is, I guess the thing that I wanted to say to you first is, like, we thought we knew you.
Yeah.
You know, we thought we knew you.
I've been waiting a long time to be rediscovered.
Yeah. I think that everybody tries to write a sentence.
Yeah.
That tells you everything that you need to know about a band. And it was you and Daryl sharing a dorm room at Temple and sharing a love of Philly soul music.
Right.
But what they really
That's also true.
Yeah. But it's like, you'd like to think that every human being is more than one sentence.
Sure. No one likes to be pigeonholed too much, but it is easy when you have a lot of success and you have a lot of and with that comes popularity and fame and all that. People do tend to just say, okay, well, that's who he is, or that's what they are, or that's the music they make. My musical experience began a long time before I met Daryl Hall. I was playing guitar from 6 years old. I met him when I was 19, so I had a number of years of playing and performing, and the stuff that I was doing was mostly roots, blues, American traditional music, and that's kind of what I brought to the table in my partnership with him. And together we melded it together, and then we went in this crazy pop direction. And now, after all these years, I have the good fortune to be able to come back to the music that really started me out.
And the thing that I think people, if they scratch a little bit on the surface, it's not just a great city for soul music, Philadelphia, right, but Philadelphia has always had this enormous folk contingent as well, and the Philadelphia Folk Fest is one of the biggest in the country.
That's right. I think they're 50-plus years ongoing. Had two great coffee houses in the 60s, one called the Second Fret and another one a little bit outside of the city called the Main Point, where I saw all the great folk singers and blues performers as they were being rediscovered during the folk boom of the 60s. And I was very fortunate to be in the city at this incredible time where on a Saturday night I could go to the Uptown Theater on North Broad Street and see James Brown and Otis Redding and the Temptations. And then I could go to the Philadelphia Folk Festival or the coffee houses and see Mississippi John Hurt and Doc Watson and Dave Van Ronk and on and on. So it was just an incredible time to be in Philadelphia. And I always say I just was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time.
So, you had this massive success with Hall & Oates, and you guys kind of made a conscious decision to step back a little bit when you were right at the height of it. And then when you came back, all of a sudden, you've got new generations discovering this music. And you all may have stepped back a little bit, but the fans sure never did. So a few years ago, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you had a guitarist in the band, T-Bone, that you loved that passed away. Your dad had started to have some health issues. And were those the things that sort of drove you to sort of say, boy, it really is time to go back and do some important unfinished work?
It was certainly part of it. It also coincided with me moving from Colorado to Nashville and being embraced by the Americana musicians in the community, this incredible group of creative people, songwriters, players, and so it all kind of came together. And at that time, and I realized, I just realized I have to do, I have to somehow go back and get back to this essential part of me that had been left behind during this skyrocket ride of pop stardom, which to be honest with you, a lot of people, I think they think that, during the 80s when Daryl and I were at our most commercially, successful, that was our favorite time. It was probably, and I think I can speak for him on this too, it was probably our least favorite time because we were pushed and pulled and there was no time to reflect on anything. And it was a constant kind of just this barrage of commercial, demands on our time and energy. So even though we were incredibly successful, it wasn't really the best period of time. So I think he and I were both kind of relieved when it was over. And it kind of gave us a chance to say, well, what's next? And what's next turned out to be a resurgence not only in Hall & Oates, but an opportunity for me to dig back into my past and rediscover part of myself.
And we're going to talk more about Arkansas because it's an amazing record and it's quite a story. But I'd love to hear some music from you.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, the Arkansas album, even though it's called Arkansas, is really, it started out as a tribute to Mississippi John Hurt. Mississippi John Hurt was one of my favorite performers. He recorded during from 1926 until 1929, and he was from Avalon, Mississippi, and very unique player, not necessarily a Delta blues player, but more of a hill country Piedmont ragtime style player. And I went into the studio, I cut a couple tracks because I play a lot of his material, and I just came away feeling a little bit empty. I thought, well, it's okay, I can do it, but why am I doing it? It's already been done. And then I had one night, I just had this idea. I said, I wonder if I assemble a band and we play these exact same songs, but we do it with an incredible band. And I put together a group of my friends and people I really have a lot of musical respect for. And from the first song we cut, they just crushed it. And my engineer turned to me and said, Johnny, he goes, I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, let's keep doing it. So that's actually, I'll play the first song that we cut. And of course, if you strip away all the instrumentation on the album, this is what you'll hear, because I'm trying basically playing the Mississippi John Hurt stuff. So anyway, it's called Stagger Lee. Officer, now how can that be? You can arrest everybody, but you afraid of Stagger Lee. He's a bad man, cruel old Stagger Lee. Billy DeLine told Stagger Lee, please don't take my life. I got 3 children and darling, lovely wife. You a bad man, cruel old Stagger Lee. I don't care about your children, I don't care about your wife, no. You done stole my Stetson hat, now I'm gonna take your life. I'm a bad man. Went that 44. Stagger Lee shot Billy DeLine down upon the barroom floor. Now he's a bad man, cruel old Stagger Lee. Well, the judge said to the jury, hey boys, what are you gonna think of that? Stagger Lee shot Billy DeLine about a $5 Stetson hat. He's a bad man, cruel old Stagger Lee. Up on the gallows, Stagger Lee did fuss and cuss. The judge said, boys, better hang him now before he kills the rest of us. He's a bad man, cruel old Stagger Lee. He's a bad man, cruel old Stagger Lee.
John Oates is our guest today on The Bridge, and I love the liner notes on the record.
Oh,
and it's like I learned so much.
Well, the liner notes are written in the style of the classic liner notes from the folk albums of the '60s, and it was written by the guy who co-wrote my book with me. Who he and I have become great friends. He really understands me. It's actually the reason we got together to write the book, and he pleaded me. He said, "Let me write the liner notes." He fell in love with the music, and he's just he's a historian. He writes a lot of history books, and it's actually one of the reasons I chose him to be my collaborator on this project. But thank you for saying that. I'm sure he would love to hear that too.
Yeah. So the 1928 version, Mississippi John Hurt, is considered to be the definitive version.
Right. Although there's millions of versions of that
Yeah,
song.
and in fact, it's sort of like you were pretty much singing Stagger Lee. But the song title on the album is Stagger Lee.
Well, it doesn't flow out of the off the tongue quite as well as Stagger Lee.
And nobody really knows who wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And being in Kansas City, I just love the fact that the first recorded mention of the song that anybody can find was in the Kansas City newspaper.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I believe that the murder occurred in St. Louis, from what I understand. But here again, it's kind of lost in the mists of history.
Yeah. It's really fabulous stuff. You know, it started. You mentioned the fact that this started out as a tribute to Mississippi John Hurt, but it sort of changed as it went along, and there were probably a couple of little different touch points that helped the evolution of the album. One was you played a gig in Arkansas, and after it was over, you found yourself wandering around a cotton field.
Yeah. Yeah, for a kid who grew up in the East Coast, wandering around in a cotton field in the moonlight along the banks of the Mississippi River is pretty moving, pretty evocative, and that's exactly what happened. Got invited to go to a little place called Wilson, Arkansas, in the northern delta of Arkansas, and we played a show, and then just hung out there. And something about the area and the cotton gins and these huge and the history, it just it kind of crystallizes for me this incredible journey of American traditional music as it came up from the South, from the Deep South, from New Orleans, up the Mississippi River, up the Blues Highway, Highway 61, up into the northern cities. And Arkansas seemed to me like the last rural stop on this incredible journey, because the next stop was, Kansas City and St. Louis and Chicago, and eventually Chicago. So, and of course the music became a little bit more sophisticated, the great Kansas City jazz tradition, and then St. Louis and Chicago, of course. So to me, it was like the end of the line for the country blues, and I wrote the song Arkansas, and it just, because it was my album, I decided to call it Arkansas.
And you also started sort of looking for the music that perhaps had inspired Mississippi John Hurt.
That's right.
And it ended up being an album that, has got a real heart of really music at the beginning of, recorded music and popular music.
Well, it all came together, all these various elements, as the album began and as we began recording. And I was so excited about sonically, just the sound of the record, because of the players and the spirit that these guys were playing, and what was happening to this great music that was like part of my musical DNA, but I had never imagined it to sound like this. Then that's when the thoughts expanded beyond, as you said it. I started to think, well, what was Mississippi John Hurt hearing on the early days of radio? What were people playing at home on the first phonograph machine that first came in? And I said, well, I've been making hit records my whole life, and I actually don't know what the first hit record was. I said, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe I should know that. So I started to do some research and kind of unearthed the fact that there was a guy named Emmett Miller who was very influential to a lot of early performers. He actually started in minstrel shows. He had a band with the unfortunate name of the Georgia Crackers, but he had a song called Anytime, which was written by a guy named Herbert Lawson, who has a completely amazing story on his own as a songwriter. He was put in jail, and he escaped from jail, and he recovered royalties that were, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but Emmett Miller recorded the song, and it actually sold 1 million copies.
Wow.
Of a record. And it's, it's arguably the first million-selling record that ever happened.
And it's the first song on your album.
So, yeah, Anytime, yeah. So should I play it?
If you'd like.
Well, okay. Well, I guess that's a pretty smooth segue, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we're concerned, you're in charge here.
Uh-oh, that's kind of a scary place to be, but all right. Anytime you're feeling lonely, anytime Anytime you feel downhearted, that will prove my love for you is true. Anytime you're thinking about me, that's the time I'll be thinking of you. So anytime you say, want me back again, that's the time I'll come back home to you. Anytime you're thinking about me, that's the time I'll be thinking of you. So anytime you say, want me back again, that's the time I'll come back home to you. So anytime you say, want me back again, that's the time I'll come back home to you.
John Oates joining us in the studio today here on the Bridge. The new album, which is just amazing, is called Arkansas. And, you know, there's so many things I want to talk about, but researching this, talking about this album, I was amazed how many times I ran across the word ragtime.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants it to be, you know, Mississippi Hill Blues,
Sure.
but there's a lot of ragtime. And of course, you're sort of in ragtime country because Scott Joplin was based out of Sedalia, 90 minutes away from here. Blind Boone, who has a shout out in your liner notes around one of the songs, Warrensburg, 60 miles away. But such an unexpected thing. I would really love to hear you talk about the role of ragtime and the sound that you got in Arkansas.
Well, ragtime, I began to appreciate how influential and how important ragtime was to this early, American popular music. It was a time when there was this rural primitive music, but there were people out there, especially piano players, who were more skillful, better actual instrumentalists, who began to translate some of this more, you know, kind of crude folk music into a little bit more of a sophisticated style. And it was primarily the ragtime, what they called stride piano players, the piano players who would play with their left hand, and it was this boom, dang, gong, gang, gong, gang, which of course then was translated to, you know, to this. And Mississippi John Hurt was essentially a kind of a rough-hewn ragtime guitarist. Of course, there were more sophisticated ragtime players like Blind Blake, for instance. And then when I thought about, well, okay, he's really playing, you know, Mississippi John's really playing ragtime, but why not go there? Let's go all the way and dive in. So I said, well, let me try a Blind Blake song because he's pretty much acknowledged as the king of the ragtime players. So,
you know, I want to go back to Philadelphia when you were young, and you alluded to Mississippi John Hurt, you know, being really in those sort of late 20s, but then there was that 60s folk resurgence.
That's right.
And you were a young man, and your mentor, teacher was a guy named, make sure I get this right, Jerry Ricks.
Jerry Ricks.
And when these blues guys would come and play in these folk revival sort of settings, they'd hit his couch. They would couch surf with him.
Well, Jerry Ricks, my guitar teacher, lived across the street from a guy named Dick Waterman. Dick Waterman was a photographer, and he became a manager of a lot of these rediscovered bluesmen in the early 60s. People like Son House, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, Robert Pete Williams, Mississippi John Hurt, Doc Watson, a lot of people like that. So when they would come to as they were being rediscovered, brought up to Philadelphia or to any of the northern cities to play these festivals and coffee houses, they were babes in the woods. I mean, they didn't know how to stay in a hotel. They didn't have any money. I mean, they were getting paid, $50, $25 if they were lucky. So, they would come to Dick Waterman's house, and when the overflow would walk across the street and stay on my guitar teacher's couch. So I got a chance to actually, I'd walk in the house and there'd be, Son House just sitting there, and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is great. And I would, just watch and learn. And, I got a chance to play with Doc and Merle Watson. And and so this was, like I said earlier, I was in this the right place at the right time.
Did you meet Mississippi John Hurt?
No, I actually never met him because he died in 1966. Yeah. I did see him play a lot when he was rediscovered, he was only rediscovered between 63 and 66, and that's when he died. And his guitar, after he passed away, was given to Jerry Ricks, who, when Daryl and I did our first album in New York, I asked Jerry to come up and play with me on the albums, and he said, "Do you want me to bring Mississippi John's guitar with me?" And I said, "Of course." And he brought it. So on the first two Hall & Oates albums, I'm playing Mississippi John Hurt's acoustic guitar.
So you wrote about that
Yes.
in your book.
Mm-hmm.
And a fan
Yes.
read the book
Yep.
and pointed out to you that there was an estate sale happening.
What? Right. Jerry Ricks went to Denver, Colorado in the mid-'70s, and he emigrated to Europe, never to come back. And he needed money, so he sold the guitar to the Denver Folklore Center, who subsequently sold it to another fellow who had it in his estate all these years since the mid-'70s. He passed away recently, and his daughter read my book and heard that I had played the guitar and found me and said, "Do you want to buy this guitar?" And I went, "Yes, I do." And so now I own Mississippi John Hurt's guitar. My only regret, and I have no regrets, believe me, but if I have any regret, it's that I didn't get it until after the album was... the album would have been almost too perfect if I would have been playing his guitar on the record. But I got it shortly after the album was completed. But now I have it. It sits in my music room on the right, and on top of the bureau is a picture of Mississippi John Hurt. So I'm in the vortex of that. I sit between the two things, and it's pretty amazing.
There's always volume 2.
There will be a volume 2. Yeah, thank you.
So how does it feel to play it? Particularly now.
Well, to be quite honest with you, it sat for over 40 years in a basement. It was not in the best shape, but it was okay. And in Denver, Colorado, it's very dry there, so it wasn't cared for very well. So when I got it back to Nashville, it took a few months with some really amazing guitar technicians to really get it back to playing shape, and now it sounds incredible. And I play it, I pull it out every once in a while, and it's funny, the guy who arranged the sale told me that every time someone would pick up that guitar, the first song they would play is Creole Belle, which is one of the Mississippi John Hurt classics. He says, I don't know why. He says, I never say anything to them. They pick up the guitar and play that song. So maybe it's got some mojo happening, coming through the strings.
And it's another song that is on...
Yes, it's on the
album Arkansas.
Right.
You talked about, you went into the studio and you tried to do the solo thing, and it just sort of like, you felt like, well, how do you be more than the original? And you almost felt like you were letting him down.
I did.
And so you formed a band, and before we got started during sound check, you started talking about your band, and your face was a kid at Christmas. Okay.
Yeah, it is. I joke that I have an embarrassment of riches. The people I surrounded myself with, not only were they great people and they're great friends, but they're also some of the greatest players on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. And we became a band in the studio, and I was able to bring that band on the road and play the live shows with me. I'll have them with me here in Kansas City tomorrow, and they're just incredible people. And there's so much talent that when the other day I was on stage with them, and I had three of one of the greatest pedal steel players in the world, Sam Bush, a legendary mandolin player, and Guthrie Trapp, who's my lead guitar player, and he's just a monster. And here I am on stage and getting to the solos, and I just look, well, who's gonna play? And I look to my right, and there's this guy. Oh, he could do it, and he could do it, and they could trade off. And it was almost like being a conductor and having this orchestra at your disposal. So it's just a great, great feeling to be able to play with friends and have them bring so much firepower and energy and passion to the music.
And, very much in the tradition of that era that you're celebrating with this album, he played live, no overdubs.
Yeah.
And you can do that if you got that band, right?
It had to be done that way.
Yeah.
I knew that it had to be done in the most authentic and period correct style, within the constraints of the modern world. But we recorded on analog tape, and we sat in a circle and we looked at each other, and there are no overdubs on this record. I can honestly say that we did maybe 1, 2, 3 takes on each song. And as soon as we had the best take, that was it. And most of what you hear me singing happened as the band was playing. A few things I had to fix, like when I messed the words up or whatever. But essentially, it's a live record in the studio.
You knew that you wanted to do vinyl.
Yeah. We intended it to. Once we realized what the sound was, my engineer said, this is a vinyl record. We're going to make this vinyl, and if it comes out on CD or you can stream it, that's just well, there it is.
So, people know, if you don't have a record player, it is on CD.
I call CDs musical business cards at this point because no one really buys them, and hardly anyone listens to them either at this point. So I just carry them around in my bag, and whenever I see some, I just hand it to them. And it's like, there you go. Here's what I got. So,
and of course, it's also available digitally. But being in Nashville and being that married to vinyl, I'm assuming that you either ran into Jack White or you talked to his people.
Well, we were going to actually have the vinyl manufactured at Jack White's new vinyl factory in Detroit, which is state of the art and really cool. But he was so backed up, we couldn't get in on time to meet our deadline. So we did it at Universal in Nashville. But we mastered. Without getting too technical, after you have a tape of a recording, it needs to be mastered and made into what they call a lacquer, which is the kind of the positive and negative that you actually make stamp the vinyl record from. And we went to a place called Back to 1979 that has old stamping machines from the 60s, and we did our lacquer and did our mastering there. And so it really, as I said, we carried the old school approach through as far as we could.
It's funny that today happens to be Valentine's Day, and this may not be romantic love, but every word that's come out of your mouth today just speaks of love for this project, love for this era. I can tell how personal this is for you.
It is. I'm very proud of this, and I think I think for the first time, and it seems crazy, being my age and with all the years I have under my belt, to say at this point in my life that I finally did exactly what I was meant to do, and I didn't know I was meant to do it, which makes it even more special. So,
yeah, back to the beginning of the interview, Chasing the Muse.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
John Oates is our guest. I'd love to talk you out one more song if I could.
Sure. You have a choice?
Well, you were talking about a song in the green room. Did you want to do that one?
Well, that's not on the album, but I'll do it.
It's up to you. You were saying how much you wanted to play that, but
yeah.
I have lots of favorites.
Well, you know what? No, you're the host. Your choice.
Okay, let me think here.
Putting you on the spot. Uh-oh.
Well, one of the ones that I thought was really sort of interesting was, and I don't know that we touched on this, but Mississippi John Hurt was a big Jimmy Rogers fan.
Yeah.
So how about Miss the Mississippi and You?
I don't know how to play that one. No. I'm kidding.
if there's something else.
I couldn't resist.
Like I said, you're in charge here, buddy.
Okay. This is a great Mississippi John Hurt was a fan of Jimmy Rogers, who, of course, was so influential he's known as the godfather of country music.
Actually, I just changed my mind.
Oh, whoa, okay.
I hope that's okay.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
I want to hear one of the ones that you wrote.
Okay.
So I'll give you the choice. You can either do Arkansas or you can do Dig Back Deep.
I'll do Arkansas.
Okay.
All right. See, this is like if you go on the Tonight Show, you got to do your hit, right? I don't have a hit, but if I had a hit, it would be this one.
I think our listeners want to hear the one you wrote.
Okay, here we go. This is called Arkansas. Here we go. There's a faded glow along the great river road, in a worn-down farmhouse, hanging on a broke-down porch, looking over miles and miles and miles. Walk along a levee silhouetted by a crescent moon. When the sun starts rising, hitting 90 before the clock strikes noon, don't you know the days and nights, dreams drift slowly by. Another Delta dawn, brings hope worth waiting on. Where that old man river flows past the snow-white cotton fields of Arkansas, yeah. There's a long black train running on the southbound track. Hear that distant whistle blowing when it calls you back to that hard-hit heartland along the muddy shore. Where that old man river flows past the snow-white cotton fields of Arkansas, yeah. And a hope worth waiting for, oh yeah. Where that old man river flows, watch it, old man river flow past the snow-white cotton fields of Arkansas, yeah. Ooh, watch it, old man river flow past the snow-white cotton fields of Arkansas, oh yeah, oh yeah. Watch it, old man river flow past the snow-white cotton fields. Watch it, old man river flow, oh yeah, past the snow-white cotton fields of Arkansas.
That's just great. Thanks so much.
Thank
John
you.
Oates, our
Great
guest
interview.
today.
Thank you.
You can find out more at johnoates.com. Arkansas is the new album, and it is available right now. You can get vinyl, you can get CD, you can get downloads. And, of course, he's going to be appearing at Folk Alliance and then coming back with Hall & Oates on Friday, July 20th at the Sprint Center. And one thing that I know from doing the research is John has great stories. And a lot of them are in the book Change of Seasons, which is available now in hardcover and paperback on May 29th. And, it's based on journals that John kept from 1970 to 1980. So you had it all right there.
I wish I still kept journaling, but I'm getting a little too lazy in my old age.
Well, it's such an act of generosity for someone that's got your track record, your history, your success to come in and take the time to share music with us today.
Well, I just love music, and I love people who appreciate music. So,
thank you so much for coming in. John Oates, the album Arkansas, today on The Bridge.